Welcome to our YouTube family. It is a blessing, and tonight we continue our teaching that we have on the biblical collaborators. And we got Brother Corey tonight that's going to be giving us our teaching. So we're going to make sure that he has it. And we're going to get set again to our YouTube family. If you have a question or comment, if you have a question, just put it in the comment section and we'll make sure we look at it tonight. All right. Brother Corey, this is now all yours.
Mhm.
Let me get out of the way.
What happened? Mhm.
Do you see the slides, Brother Corey?
I do. I do see it now. Yeah, it was kind of slow coming in, but it's there. Yes, good evening, everyone. Uh, Everybody know who I am. We are going to talk about the collaboration between Moses and Aaron. Um, this is going to be actually a pretty good reflection. Please think hard and long about what I'm about to tell you, and what we're going to try to pull from this is how this can have not only have an effect on your life of what have already had an effect on your life when we involve collaboration with one another, when people come together for good that's not well that wouldn't normally be together. You know what I'm saying? Like relationship wise. Uh, I'll use the word in the term unlikely. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but how unlikely is a person like you or me with a rough past or possibly a speech impediment or some kind of issue that you wouldn't likely be chosen for such a role that you're currently facing or you're currently in. So we all fall short sometime, but God can use us all. And this is our study guide. We'll go and talk about every single one of these to include more. I'll ask some questions throughout the presentation, just so you can reflect on how this ties into your current role in your life itself. Next slide, Apostle. These will be our biblical collaboration that we'll talk about. We'll talk about the biblical collaboration between um, Moses and Aaron, the covenant collaborators, what they did together, how long their relationship, how they built trust, their faith, and how God aligned them to each other and for His purpose and His will, their strategic ways and how they developed their relationship to benefit what God had in mind for them to do. The mentors and mentoree as far as who is what in the collaboration, and people outside of those that helped mentor and collaborated with them. But we're really going to focus on Moses and Aaron, the antagonists, collaborators, how they work together, their conflicts, their the issues that they ran in, opposition, and the unlikely, like I used the term before, unlikely collaborators. And you'll see just how unlikely Aaron and Moses, such as others in the Bible, was, and how they correlate and can relate to the roles of these two individuals. And as we talked earlier about the collaboration, a lot of this started, with, let's just talk about Joseph real quick. Joseph. Joseph died, who, Joseph was, one of the highest servants there in Israel, in the land of Egypt. And he was also a Jew as well, but he dies. Um, he dies. Joseph dies. Therefore, the new Pharaoh was in place. New Pharaoh was in place, and that new Pharaoh had a whole different ball game for the people of Israel. And when the new Pharaoh came into to ruling, which we noticed that there were so many, many. Israelites, and he knew that there were more Israelites than there actually were Egyptian. And he became not only upset, but he became worried that they're probably going to be overpowered at some point. So what the new Pharaoh did, of course, and I know everybody know the story, but for me it was so breathtaking and refreshing. He ordered that all the male-born children be murdered by being tossed into the river, the Nile River. And everybody knows what happens in the Nile River. You just don't go and walk and swim in the Nile River. Nile River is filled with crocodiles. They're the biggest crocodiles in the world. So these kids were fed to crocodiles. And this is not just a story. This is actually a true story. Of course, it's in his word, so we know that it's to be true. Could you imagine that today, what that would be like? And in essence, it does happen today in our times, but in a totally different way. Um, and the Pharaoh, the new Pharaoh, what he had for Israelites and what his insight was, he made them all slaves. That's what he wanted. He wanted all to be slave. He wanted to be the ruler, and he was the ruler. But he looked at Israelites as just shepherds, and not people uh, of of Egyptian culture or Egyptian period. He just thought Egyptians were superior, and all the newborn males were to be killed to eliminate the population from being increased. Um, so Moses' mother, that says Jochebed. I used to know a lady named Jochebed. I didn't know it was necessarily a name, but that's how it's kind of pronounced. The daughter of Levi and the wife of Amram, you know, uh, which was Moses' his mother. Moses' mother, Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, whose name is also considered to be Yahweh. And I looked at that so many different times. Yahweh is glory. That's exactly what her name meant. So unlikely, that she would birth a child, and this child would become who is Moses. So being that Pharaoh gave this command that all male-born children shall be cast into the Nile River and fed to the crocodiles, she took it upon herself to hide Moses, and she hid him for 3 months, about 3 months. She wrapped him up, swallowed him up in clothing, sounds familiar, and put tar into the bottom of the basket, not just for it to stay afloat, but it also eliminates the attraction of crocodiles. Crocodiles don't want to be eating anything that smells like tar. We can all hardly take the smell of tar because it's very potent. So she knew exactly what she was doing, and she placed him in the river in such a way that it would reach the princess. Pharaoh's is princess daughter. Being that she did this simply because she knew that this is where she showered and bathed and cleansed herself. And her aide, which was Moses' sister, Miriam, was also along her side to assist with her washing or whatever the case may be, at this river. When the baby, of course, approached him, they took the baby up and took him into the palace, which was, again, is Moses. So Moses stayed there for a short period of time, but they realized that this is a new baby and this baby needed to be fed and it needed to be breastfed. The only person can do that is somebody that produces milk. So Miriam took it upon herself and said, this baby needs to be fed, and took the baby back to her mother uh, to provide nursing for Moses. Okay. After a period of time, 3 years, after she could no longer care for him, she sent him back to the palace to be raised. So not only was Moses uh, very unlikely, to be raised in the palace, if this hadn't happened, if mother didn't possibly do what she did, he would have probably been killed. Um, so again, that word unlikely, and I want that to sit just with you, because how many times that you look upon your own life and figure like, man, why, I'm getting I'm getting this job or I got this promotion is I'm from like myself from little old Georgetown with a town of probably 50 people. I'm exaggerating, it's a little more than that, maybe 55. Not very much. But I would never thought I would have made as much success as I did. And my wife Keisha as well. We always look upon ourselves and like, man, we're really out here, doing this and raising children. But we're from just a short period of time. And if you saw where we were raised and how we were raised and the schools that we went to, it would probably be unlikely that we will, had some sort of success or do some of the things we accomplished. So when I look at Moses and read about Moses' story, I also reflect upon myself and my father uh, and mother and their success. Because I would look at them and say they were probably unlikely as well to do some of the things that they did, but they have overcome such a lot. And it just reminded me a lot of myself and a lot of the men I deal with here, not just in Virginia, but I've came across with and served with. Unlikely. So when we think about that, we think about according to the Jewish tradition, Jochebed is sometime her name was Shifra. Some people say Shifra, and that's in a Hebrew name. And she defied the orders of Pharaoh. Of course, they didn't know, but Moses knew exactly who he was. And Moses stayed in the palace for over 40 years. He stayed there for 40 years. During the time that when he exiled himself, or he left himself, he stumbled upon two of his Israelite brothers. When he came upon them, they were doing arguing, fussing, and fighting. And Moses is a kind of a virtuous man, a man of good honor. And he kind of talked to them and said, "Hey, why are you fighting? Why are you guys fighting each other? Um, to stop all the fighting." He would do this a numerous numbers of time. He always wanted them to get along and stop fighting amongst each other. We need to work together. One particular time, Moses walked upon a soldier whipping one of his Israelite brothers. And Moses became upset. And he looked around, and it was only him, the Israelite, and the one of the soldiers, one of Pharaoh's soldiers. And I guess he was whipping him in such a way that it was probably they were probably gonna kill him. Moses stopped him, and Moses committed murder and killed him himself. Moses killed him and buried him in the sand. One of the worst things you can do is bury somebody in the sand, because if it rains or something like that, they're going to find it. Anyway, they never really necessarily did that. But the Israelite, his Hebrew brother, knew who Moses was, and he also knew what Moses did. So the only person knew that Moses murdered this person was him, Moses himself, and this Israelite. The very next day, when I said Moses stumbled upon people arguing, he stumbles upon these people fussing and fighting, and it happened to be the same guy that he saved uh, him from the soldier that was whipping him, that was beating him. And when he stumbled across him, and he told him like, "Hey, why are you guys fighting? Why are you fussing and fighting amongst each other? Why would you be doing this? Stop doing this." The guy asked him, say, "Why? Why are you worrying about us? What you gonna do? Tell on us? You gonna kill me like you killed this other soldier, the soldier that he killed the day prior to?" So sometimes you look over your life and you be like, man, you really gotta be careful about who you save. Because for me, just in my opinion, I don't know this for sure, the same person that Moses saved is the same one that ratted him out. That's just my opinion. I don't know that to be true. The same guy. So uh, be careful about who you save and what you save. So again, Moses is now considered a murderer. He is definitely unlikely probably to be chosen by God, but that's how we think. We think God can't use us because we've done something wrong, or we have defiled him, or we was disobedient and things like that. God will and can use us all. So when we look at what Moses has done, Moses left and he exiled himself and he was gone for 40 years. Here is where the collaboration between him and Aaron comes into play. Once Moses exiled himself, he became now he's a shepherd, working and uh, found himself being a shepherd in a foreign land that he didn't know anything about. And he comes across this burning bush when God speaks to him and tells him and gives him several commands. So when we start at Exodus 4, chapter 14 through 16, and it reads, "So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite your brother?" Talking to Moses at the time. "I know that he can speak well. And look, he is also coming to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart." So Aaron hasn't seen his brother in almost 4 decades, almost 40 years. Moses is now 40 years old. Last time he saw him, he was possibly 3 years old, at least from according to the Bible, or related him as his brother like that in that sense. And verse 15 is that now you shall speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do and say. So he shall be your spokesman, meaning Aaron will be Moses' spokesman. Moses has a slight speech impediment. And I too forget words and stumble across words sometime. My father is a habitual stutterer, and he was like that all his life. He's a lot better now, but it was times that he could not possibly get his words out, and people would tease him about it. So you can imagine what Moses' confidence level was like when God told him that you would be speaking to people, and I need you to do this. And Moses just had, very little low self-esteem and lack of confidence to be like, I can't speak. No, I won't do it. I can't do it. And it angered God. So God, had to be really direct. Like, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to do. If I'm telling you to do, obviously, I'm going to help you through it. And I'm going to help you to it. He placed Aaron in to be his aide along his side to speak for him. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be as your mouth for you, and he shall be to him as God. So as God speak to him, both of them, speaking to Aaron, Aaron will be relaying what he needs to be, what he will be saying for Moses, and it will become through Moses. Moses had what we call that staff and that power. God was using Moses and Aaron. You see how unlikely they are? These two brothers, blood brothers, hadn't seen each other in 40 years. Unlikely because Moses is considered, an Egyptian. Although he knew he was an Israelite, he was considered an Egyptian. But he had exiled himself because he killed this guy. So it was unlikely they would even reunite their relationship or reunite together because he didn't want to be nowhere in the vicinity of his hometown because he know if was seen, he would be killed because of him killing the soldier. And Pharaoh was so, although they were raised as brothers, he was so upset with him. Number one, because he left. Number two, because he killed this Egyptian soldier. In Exodus 17, it says, You shall take this rod in your hand, which with which you shall do the signs. Whatever God tells them to do, this staff and this rod had all the power. Miss Elder Jackie always used to say to me before, and I never really understood why she used to say that. It used to make me laugh when I would come, because I walk with a cane. One of them is kind of tall, and the other one's a little bit shorter. She'd always ask, "What's that in your hand?" And she would always call me Moses. And sometimes people say things and you just don't really get what they're saying. But I knew before, but now I really know why, she used to say that. So she got my attention a couple of years later, but it is now I see. In Exodus 2:10, it said, when the child grew older, she took him to the Pharaoh daughter, and he became her son. She was the one that named him Moses. The princess is the person that named Moses. It wasn't necessarily his mother, Moses' name is derived from how she found him, meaning it's drew from the water. She brought him from the water. Oh, I drew him out of the water, meaning he was in the Nile River, fully, swallowed in closing, and he was also covered in tar to deplete the crocodiles from taking him. And uh, that's the beginning of this story with Moses. Had this not happened and his mother not do what she did, Moses Moses wouldn't become who he is. It would have been very unlikely that Moses go on to free the Israelites and free the people. It would have been very unlikely that that's what would have probably happened based on what Pharaoh set for them to accomplish in the later years. Next slide.
I just want to say
Mhm.
thank you, Corey. That's a very good recap into where we are because of I like how you brought us up to chapter 4, but to the story itself,
Mhm.
how we could miss just how everything worked out so well with his mom to the princess getting him on the other side. So thank you for that. That's really good.
Yes, ma'am. I really like I told you, yesterday when we spoke about it, it really opened my eyes to a lot because I really, we watched The Prince of Egypt, a little movie, and we watch sometimes on Netflix some of their speaking about the king of the Prince of Egypt and things like that. But when you read it and you do a really deep dive, you'd be like, oh my God, this is what it was really all about. It's very interesting. And it was unlikely that we would have found a lot of this out, but here we meet so many unlikely men and women in God's word, and it just blows my mind. So thank you for that too. Um,
Hey, I also wanted to say I 100% agree with Apostle. This is really good. This is actually one of my favorite stories in the Bible because it just has so much richness and
yes.
in the background of it, it just shows a whole lot about how God moves. And when even when you were talking about how Moses, how he killed the soldier,
Mhm.
and we got to be careful who we save. My take is a little different. I think that he um, we should be careful,
Mhm.
not who we're protecting, but how we're protecting people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think with him, it was out of anger,
Mhm.
and he killed that man, and
Mhm.
Moses had the authority to tell that soldier to stop. You know
Yes.
what
Yeah.
I mean? He
Mhm.
did, but out of his anger,
Mhm.
he took it upon himself to kill him, and I think that's what really scared the Israelite man, because I think anybody probably was scared to be like,
Right.
well, wait a minute, you went too far,
Right.
So it's just really good. All of this is
Yes.
really good. I really appreciate how
Yes,
you
ma'am.
breaking down the word for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. And I also interpret it as he didn't intend it on killing him. It was an accident. And I think he thought that he, would have been uh of course, severely punished for it because of who he was. Had it been another soldier doing this and another Egyptian, it probably wouldn't have been more as severe. I think he just became afraid, and what would happen to him. Yes, but thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, Moses lived, as an Egyptian. He talked what when he could like them. He ate with them. He walked with them. That song, "I Walk Like an Egyptian." I remember that. I keep calling my head. But I can imagine him doing that because Israelis they carried Israelites they carried themselves so different than the people of Egypt would do. They definitely walked differently because most of them walked with their head down. They couldn't look at the soldiers in their eyes. They always had to walk at like they're always enslaved. So I knew that this was significant when that word unlikely, came up and it kept just sticking with me. Why would unlikely be coming up so many times? And so we read the next slide is we're going to talk about, a little bit about Moses and we're going to jump into Aaron as well. Again, Moses, of course, he was a Hebrew. Um, his Hebrew name was Moshe, or Moshe, however you want to pronounce that, with the Bible link verb as Masha, still meaning drawn out. His father, Amram, the father, of course, of Moses, he was a Levite, descendant of Levi, and the third son of Jacob and Leah, which I think we talked about a few months ago, just a short period. And you can see that Jochebed or Jochebed, who was also a tribe of Levi as well, and they had the three children, Miriam, which was his sister, Aaron, his brother, who we'll talk about here in a second, and of course Moses. Um, of course, his mother was of good faith and courage. We talked about one of the questions that we're going to talk about too, about the faith and courage and collaboration. His mother, it started with not only just Joseph, but it also started with his mother, because could you possibly think and imagine what it would be like to have to give up your child, not knowing his future, his or her future, and how would that be? And to cast him in a river full of crocodiles, now crocodiles at that. Um, and with hopes and prayers uh, that it would reach the princess or whoever on the other side that would raise them to be an Egyptian. She took it out on a limb to do this, and she only had this baby for 3 months. So, my hat goes off to her, because this is considered to me a very virtuous woman, or the very first virtuous woman I'm thinking about in scripture. Moses' wife, we'll talk about later on too, is Zipporah, who was the daughter of Jethro, not Jethro from Beverly Hills Billy, but Jethro in the Bible, who was also a priest of the land of Midian. And that's where he goes. That's where the land he was when he exiled himself that for 40 years. This is the guy that took him under his wing and taught him some things and, made him a shepherd. But he fell for Jethro's daughter. Um, and fell in love with her, and then they end up, getting married and having children of their own. And they birth Gershom, and was the firstborn son of Moses, and that is mentioned in Exodus 22, where Moses give him the name, explaining, "I have become a stranger to a foreign land," meaning he have exiled himself and he's been gone, gone for that long, over 40 something years, um, from his family, and now he finds himself in another foreign land of people that he don't know, and he fell in love with this woman, and they had two baby boys. And his other son was Elijah, which also means wear him from Pharaoh's sword. Moses explained that he named Elijah, "My God has helped me." Not only did he name his first child um, after something significant, uh, he names his second boy the same thing. So it kind of makes, his not bringing his own identity, but the person he has become. Now he's casting those and praying those upon his children. So I'm sure that someone, because he won't forget. He's a stranger in a foreign land, and God has helped him throughout all he has been through now for over 40 years. And now I have a family of my own. God still is helping me. And I think he never lost faith at some point throughout his life. And God's, knew that he thought himself of to be unlikely, and he thought him to be insignificant. But God can use you, even if you think you're insignificant, even if you think you're unlikely, even if you think you're not worthy. God chooses the unworthy and the unlikely. Next slide. Okay, Aaron. So we discussed Moses earlier. Aaron is Moses's brother, one of his oldest brother. He did not have a speech impediment, like we said earlier. He could speak very well and fluently, as the Bible would tells us. But it didn't necessarily say what languages he would speak fluently. It's just that he spoke eloquently, and he speak with great prestige, I should say. And unfortunately, Moses could not. Of course, he was always Hebrew. And Aaron name means, in Hebrew, named Mountain of Strength, where, you can talk about this, or exiled, and which meaning Mountain of Strength. So where we consider Moses to be weak, this is where Aaron comes in at. He had somebody to lift him up and be his strong side. Where one shoulder is weak, he would pick him up, and he had somebody to lean on to, not just be spoken for. And also the possible interpretation would be enlightened and brought light to Moses where his light would be dim. Father, his father, uh, Laban in 29, I'm sorry, that's a mistype. Siblings, Moses and Miriam. And children, his children name were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ethamar, which is in Leviticus, all in Leviticus 1:10, 1 through 2. In 1 and 2, it talks about um, Nadab and Abihu, which were the oldest two sons of Aaron. And these boys are also consecrated as priests alongside their father and brothers as well. And they lived a very short life due to grave error in their service, and they died. The third son of Aaron succeeded his father as a high priest after Aaron's death. He played a crucial role in the leadership of Israel during the wilderness period as well. So you can see how this all trickled down to not only their, Aaron and Moses, their children as well. Ithamar, the youngest of Aaron, served also as a priest. Um, and this is noted in the inventory of the tabernacle. He was responsible for furnishing it, and he was considered more of a servant, and a son of Aaron the priest was a kind of a servant in the tabernacle itself. Next slide. And going back to Aaron's last son, although he wasn't a high priest as, such as the other three, people also, when they want to, be in the church, they want to preach, everybody want to preach, but they're just as good as virtuous as a servant as you is also as a preacher. Whether you're passing out napkins, handing out mint candy, or whatever you're doing, passing out, brochures and stuff during the church, you're still serving at some capacity. Those things are considered high esteem as well, not just being in the highest appointed priest in the church. Moses and Aaron's home. I don't know many of you have been to Egypt. I have been to Egypt. It's certainly not what we see on TV. Do not get it twisted. But I encourage you all to, if we can, please, as past Apostle Sharon was saying earlier, get your passport. At some point, visit, places like Egypt and Jerusalem. Certainly not now. Give it a couple years. Definitely don't go now. But this is a beautiful place. But it's not like what you see on TV. It's not gold and stuff everywhere. But just think about how the distance between they all were, and the miles and stuff they had to travel. When you think about from Egypt to Midian, where Moses exiled himself to, how far he really had to run and hide and travel during that time. And in the desert like that, it is extremely hot. Just by him surviving that with no aid and no water and things like that, God surely has helped him. That's why he named his son. So when we think about that, we talk about Moses and Aaron, his parents who were in Egypt. You can look just at the land of Goshen, and they were born, of course, to his father, Aram and Jochebed in the land of Goshen. And if you look closely at the map, I don't know how close you guys can see it, but if you hover just below the Mediterranean Sea, Goshen is right there where Apostle has the cursor marker that. Egypt is just south of that. Sinai, of course, is to the right to the east, and Midian is further east of that as well. And you see where the Red Sea is there? Don't think that that's small. That is huge. So if he had to run from Egypt, he didn't do it certainly by parting that water and getting on a boat and going across. He did this by land. So you can see just how far he had to travel up in the northern area around these things. And I'm pretty sure snakes, asps, serpents, and all kinds of things out there that could have got him, but he did not fall short. So I'm sure it took him several years or days to get where he needed to be. In that kind of climate, it must have been devastating, but he made it. Um, and Moses lived there, we said, for 40 years, marrying Zipporah and working as a shepherd. You know, shepherd is also frowned upon by Egypt. It didn't look like as a prestige, type of position anybody could have. When you look at a shepherd, you know, people don't want to serve as a shepherd because that's just you're shepherding what? Not just people, but sheep, almost like a herder. Uh, Many people want to be the shepherd, but not many people want to be the sheep or the lamb. But in Egypt's eyesight, you didn't want to be neither because you were beneath them from what they see. And during this time in Exodus, they live in temporary tents, was Moses frequently visiting tents of meeting to converse with God. So he had his own sacred spot that he would get a chance to go and speak to God too, and pray and worship and things like that. Next slide. So when we talk about the pre-collaboration relationship between Moses and Aaron before they met up, this before the burning bush and before these God spoke to them, or even God was probably speaking to them during that time, but it wasn't a time for them to meet up yet. But when God finally did, the collaboration, the pre-collaboration, Moses and Aaron, we talked about earlier, they were brothers, and they hadn't seen each other for decades, almost four to be exact, over four to be exact. So at this time, you're thinking Moses got to be 80 plus years old, walking back to Egypt at that time, man, you had to do this by cattle or camel, however they traveled. Even the camels, water in their bodies, uh, they can survive that kind of heat, but you just think of how devastating it was and how really God have covered them and kept them to travel back to Egypt to face Pharaoh. And we'll get into that a little more here in a minute. And we talk about the pre-collaboration, how God appointed them and formed a key partnership with them, biblically wise, to combine their leadership, both Moses and Aaron, to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt to free the slave. And Aaron, of course, functioned as Moses' mouthpiece before Pharaoh and the people. The partnership between the two brotherhood, they did not choose one another because, number one, Aaron had no idea where Moses ran off to. They necessarily didn't even know Moses ran off. They just know he wasn't where he was before. Something must have happened to him. And I could think in my head, or just possibly think that they possibly thought he was dead. So when God spoke to both of them, I'm sure Aaron was like, wow, yeah, sure, why not? Of course. And when they finally met up, they were pretty overwhelmed and moved by it. They were in fact blood brothers, and resulting of daily life, they shared.
Oh, I think he's frozen on my end too, or just Corey.
No, he is frozen.
Yeah, he
He's
frozen for me
frozen.
too.
Okay. All right, y'all. Let's give him just a couple minutes.
How about now?
There you go. Now we got you back.
Got you back? Okay. What did all y'all miss? Not much? Good. Okay. Next slide, Apostle. Sorry about that. I don't know what it is.
Hey, Corey,
Right,
just
yes.
before you go to the next
Mhm.
slide, I just want to make sure because you're giving such great info
Yes, ma'am.
or revelation. I don't want to just say info. I want to make sure we take a minute for people to digest and maybe ask questions or give.
Oh, okay.
comments.
Yes,
I'll make
please.
sure.
Mhm.
So would you explain the in the bottom right there? I think it's
Mhm.
flipped though, but what were you showing us just how it flows down?
Yes, this one is. How in the world did I do that? Let
I think it's
me.
this flip. I think it's this flip.
It flipped over. Yes, this is showing you how the Levites and how all of them became who they are from their family tree, basically. That's what it is. Between Moses and Aaron and where they fell at in that category.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else, any questions or comments before we move on? I just want to make sure we're digesting what he's saying. This is good.
Yes, one thing, Brother Corey, even to y'all, one thing I will say, this is definitely some good chewing here. But one of the things I will say, just like when you think about Moses and how he studied and how that what he went through, I can truly identify with that because some people in their upbringing and I reckon their ignorance all at one time, you become the laughing stock. Oh, you slow, you retarded, this, that, and other. And but eventually, but I thank God that when you get under a ministry that don't see your shortcomings or don't see your flaws or your challenges, and then when you start to embrace what God is doing, and when I tell you the most excited thing was when Dr. K first had ministered to me and she said, Robin, but when you pray, you don't stutter. And so to me, I kept that above in my head. And so even though when I do it, I don't beat myself up now because God still get the point across one way or the other. I think sometimes God uses these things might become just like a thorn in your flesh, that God will just keep you right there. So now I have learned now to endure it and keep going and just do what God say do, regardless of whether people like it or not.
Absolutely, Ms. Robin. I'm glad you said that because I was even choosing my words carefully because I just definitely did not want to offend anybody because I know what it's like. A lot of people would talk about me when I worked, because, from Georgetown and Charleston area, we have a very good uh, dialect and it's very strong. Our accent does not go off well, almost as if we're seeing unintelligent. But I am highly educated. And so are you, Robin. I love when you bring forth the word throughout your prayers and your Bible study. And I don't even hear or care about your shortcomings or your slight speech impediments. I too have a TBI, so I know what that is like. But as we are considered unlikely, look how far we have come and look just how much God has used us. So we can be Moses and Aaron at some point too. I do have a staff, but we can't speak for one another per se, but you can definitely flow a little better than I can. So we'll work on that. How about that?
Amen. That's good, you two.
Amen.
All right now.
Amen.
Don't y'all start anything up in here.
Thanks for that, Miss Robin. Any other questions?
Collaboration.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. It's the year of it, right?
Amen.
Any more questions? Okay, next slide. I just wanted to touch base on this real quick from Exodus 7. These are the type of things that Moses and Aaron was able to do and able to bring forth, not just themselves, but through God, because of Pharaoh's disobedience and because of him not adhering to God's word. Let my people go over and over and over again. The water filled with blood water, they called it. Um, the infestation of frogs just hopping everywhere. I mean, I couldn't even possibly imagine it. Lice, everybody was affected with lice in their hair and their bodies, and flies. I hate flies, but can you imagine these flies all over you? Thousands and millions of them. I mean, flies so much that you couldn't even see the sun. It blotted out the sun. It was so dark. And these also the locusts as well. Animals died from diseases. Only the people in Egypt, though, what I mean, it was a whole land that was just plagued with these things. Um, and of course, the Israelites were still prospering. So boils all over their bodies. I don't know if you ever had a boil at some point, but they're extremely painful. It's almost like a blister from a burn or something like that. Um, and, when I, got into an accident not too long ago and I had that big burn on my arm, it was filled with just nothing but, fluid, from being burned. My skin was. Can you imagine it all over your body? There's no way possible. I can imagine how high their blood pressures were and just how quick they would possibly die, especially being in the condition and the heat that they were in. Hail, just nothing but ice, big lumps of hail coming down. I mean, probably hitting people in the head, killing them instantly, just from brain damage. The darkness covered where it would cover the sun. There were no more darkness. It was dark for days. And the deaths of the firstborn Egyptian family and kids. And Pharaoh, of course, became so upset and heartbroken, and he was just done after his son had died, even after Moses warned him so many times before that this would happen. And I know Moses loved his Pharaoh and loved him as a brother because they were raised as brothers. And now he looked at him as family, and knowing the child that he knew to be his, not blood nephew, but nephew, uh, had perished and died because of the lack of obedience of Pharaoh, and didn't heed to God's word. That probably broke him in many different ways. And I'm sure at sometimes Moses became very weary, and I can imagine that only any man would to see these things happen. But he had to do God's will, and he set it out to do it, and he did. And it's unfortunate these things had to happen for him to get their attention, which he still didn't in the end. Um, and this leads us to our next slide. Any question on any of this? Yeah, nobody don't talk about the plagues because that thing almost like COVID, but much, much worse. The collaboration types uh, between Moses and Aaron. Again, we talk about the unlikely collaboration. Let's talk about in the beginning how this would unlikely they would unlikely be collaborating. They're unlikely simply because what? They hadn't seen one another in decades. They didn't know where each other were. So as you can see here with the image I have there, God speaking to Moses is like, hey, this is what's going to happen. You have a brother named Aaron. I'm going to send him to you. He's going to speak for you. I know you can't speak. I know you stutter on your words and you can't get it out sometimes, but I got somebody for you that's going to help you through this. Just bear with me, but do not deviate from what I tell you to say and what I tell you to do. Do exactly as I say and exactly as I do. And of course, Moses, you know, give a little bit of pushback. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Hey, I got you, man. Aaron's coming. He's going to speak for you. Moses and Aaron, with unlikely collaborators, united by divine command by our Father. But they had a natural partnership because they were blood brothers. And Moses was very impulsive and stuttering shepherd, while Aaron was a people pleaser. When impulsive mean, of course, when they talk about impulsive, Aaron's, Moses would do things, spontaneous and extreme, so he needs some kind of act right. And his older brother would sometimes act as that. Sometimes when Keisha and I, tease one another. She'd call my brother, hey, you need to get your brother, man. He did this, he did that. And Sean would call me, boy, what you got going on? What you doing? Why you doing this? Why you doing that? Man, I ain't do nothing. But I would listen every time. Uh, and I think it was out of a level of respect for my brother. Morgan would sometimes call and fuss with my brother because I got on her for something she do, and Sean would call me and like, man, why you messing with that girl? Stop messing with her. Give her what she wants, whatever the case may be. And sometimes I would, sometimes I won't. I'm not sparing the rod and I ain't spoiling the child, but he would get on me and sometimes she gets her way regardless. That's what kind of relationship they kind of had. And it worked, and God knew that, and he put this relationship together. So the collaboration was destined by our Lord and Savior. Moses was also fearful. Like I said earlier, he was lacked confidence. And he hesitated a lot. But they both worked together, utilizing their both leadership roles and skills because Moses was a leader. He, one of the highest in as far as a son in one of the Pharaoh's son in Egypt. Aaron, who was fluent in speaking, made him also unlikely yet necessary because he was second in command. He wasn't, although he was older than Moses, he wasn't the one beating most of the word from our Lord and Savior. It was Moses who had most of the power through that rod. And it said because Moses had a speech impediment, he stuttered. That's why Aaron was chosen. Any questions on this slide? Bear with me, guys. We got just a couple more to go and we'll be through. The collaborators' assignment. We talked about that just earlier. Moses served as the leader, and from God's command. Aaron, who was second in command, was the priest, and he also was support. So if you can think where Moses was weak, again, like I said, Aaron was the strong point. Where Moses lacked, Aaron took up the slack. As brothers, they collaborated across several critical phases within the Israel liberation. Early formation of some of the Israelites, uh, figuring out strategies of how they were going to free the people, but they need to do exactly how God told them and not deviate from it. As a result of collaboration, they led Israel to liberation and established their own covenant with God. Moses' contribution through all of this, for his sons, when we talk about relationship contributions and family contributions, he birthed the two sons we talked about earlier, Gershom and Elijah, and we talked about their names. Same thing with Elijah, how they were given their names and what they were derived from, and their spiritual redemptive and contribution. They also were ancestors of the Gershonites, of course, one of the three main Levitical clans. We saw that map where Levi was, and how big and how spread out it was throughout Egypt, and how far they were from Egypt as well. They were responsible for transporting and caring for the curtains and coverings in the tabernacle. Elijah embodied the theme divine deliverance. He became a little bit higher on that platform, and did deliverance as a priest, as well as taking care of the tabernacle and its cleanliness and well-being of the curtains and the sanctuary. Next slide. Hey, the face contribution. Oh, sorry. The face contribution. The inclusion of genealogy of Levi, it demonstrated the covenant of faithfulness. As you can see in the picture there, Moses with his two boys and how they were brought up. They were deeply, deeply religious, and how they studied and how they prayed and how they lived and where they lived. He questions God just as in Silas at one point, seeing God as a strangler who tolerates evil. Elijah did, but he became, obedient and began to serve the Lord in a pristine capacity in the tabernacle itself. And these are two pictures. That one, of course, is from the movie Prince of Egypt. The one in the middle is a sculpture of Moses and his two sons, Gershom and Elijah. And this is to Elijah and Gershom. When you look at them, and what I did notice is when Moses, it would characterize him as so different. He wasn't like the Egyptian. Their hair was totally different. The Israelites' hair was kind of like, he was a Jew, he was a Hebrew, and the hair was more, of kind of like wool, of curly, like, had a little bit of coarse to them. They were brownish people, much like myself and you and I. So we could tell how different they were when you think about them and the Egyptians and how they look, and the pigmentation of their skin and their hair and their features. Next slide. When we think about the collaborators' assignment, let's talk about Aaron's collaboration and his assignment. We talked just earlier briefly and a little more in depth on the other few slides of his role and what Aaron's role was, that God had established the priesthood through Aaron and his male descendants as generations, role as mediating between God and the people, which also was 16. The national contribution that Aaron and his son were set apart, exclusive line of priests. So when you think about a national contribution, like what did Aaron actually do, his contribution to the nation, and the contributions that Moses had for the nation by his two sons. His two sons, they were their contribution, other than the things that they did personally, but they contributed through their sons who served as priests and served the house of the Lord through these tabernacles and being assigned the deliverance priest or the servant to take care of the tabernacle and its curtains and drapes and things like that. And could you imagine what it likes to take care of these things? All the dust and all the windstorms they would have, these things will constantly need to be dusted off and cleaned and well taken care of. And these things are heavy. They're not like our curtains that you go buy at Walmart. These things they had a lot of weight to them, so it took a lot of care, to a lot of time and effort to care for some of these things. So these type of roles within the tabernacle was definitely not frowned upon. They were considered a prestige position and role to serve. And that was their, considered a national contribution to the nation. His sons his sons were even to serve God and serve the Lord as a whole by doing such a thing. Together, Aaron's sons, like I said, taught the laws of God, and offered blessings to the people. Uh, some, sacred blessings, sacred meetings. They would meet in certain tents, like we said earlier, like Moses used to do when he was in Midian. Uh, these two boys did the same, and they were raised in the church until the day, they died. The key national contribution between Aaron and his sons were part of his Cusa's line of priests, in worship and sacrifice. They all performed mediators and sacrifice, maintaining purity of the tabernacle. And their spiritual leadership, they taught, like I said earlier, taught the book, the word and the laws of God, and they offered blessings. Next slide. The contribution fulfillment of Moses and Aaron's collectively. We said again they were unlikely, but guess what? They were unlikely but necessary. A necessary togetherness, a necessary collaboration. Their partnership both were also unusual and essential, but it was so again necessary. The Masra raised Pharaoh's court, educated the Egyptian ways, initially doubted his ability, but they led the Israelites, breaking generational exploitation. Because had they not done this, they would have been enslaved for the rest of their life. They would have been the servant of Egyptian and the Pharaoh himself. And that was not going to happen, not under God's eye. And God wanted to let his people go. And eventually they had to. God appointed Aaron and his brother Moses to be the first high priest. And they worked together collectively to do God's work and to free the people of Israel. Next slide. And these are one of the questions and elements of earlier in our second slide, Moses and Aaron's collaboration elements. And we saw this, of course, throughout chapter 4. But if you read, Exodus 3 all the way up to 7, or the entire chapter, you will see that these men they're definitely unlikely, but certainly chosen. Their intercession and mediation, they both served as mediators between God and Israel. Their support and unity in action, how they were not just limited to Aaron. Aaron's support was not just limited to Moses' speech, but the prayer, the worship, the interceding, held up his hands and things like that, and the encouragement. When Moses would get weary, Aaron would, where he lacked, Aaron would pick him up. Aaron will be there for him. He'll be that big brother that we all wish to have or hope to have, or want to be. And this will teach us, not only for your blood relatives, for a friend, sometimes we can be that shoulder to cry on, but we won't cry on it, allow them to cry on it too long. At some point, we need to grab a hold of you and say, hey, let's get it together. We need to intercede. We need to go to prayer. We need to ask God for guidance. We need to intercede this thing. We need some kind of some prayer warriors to get together and pray us through this thing. But we gotta want to do it for ourselves individually. They shared the responsibility and their purpose. So, although a lot of the weight was on Moses' shoulder, Aaron also offered his help to pick up some of the things that, what was causing him to be overwhelmed sometimes. They shared both responsibility. Speaking to people in one spot, they not always were they together at all times, but when it comes to, dealing with the Pharaoh, they always, most of the time, were together. Sometimes they were separate, preaching or talking to certain people. He should be, Aaron would be helping the Israelis, Israelites and Israeli people, the, Hebrews and the slaves. Moses would be somewhere doing the same, but a different part, of that area. So they shared the responsibility and representing the authority of the Lord and spiritual services, which provided their structure and balance. Next slide. We talked about this a little bit earlier, their personality and, role differences. Uh, the biblical account of Moses were both his strengths to their collaboration and the challenges that hinder it. While they were called by God, they had a lot of potential uh, barriers to impede them from getting to leading the people out of Israel. Their personality differences was Moses is described as humble and hesitant. We said that earlier. And of course, he had inadequate public speaking. Aaron was very, very fluent in speaking. Their leadership and authority delegation, God's plan paired them. But Moses had to trust Aaron to speak on his behalf. He had some doubt in the beginning, but of course, he had to learn to trust God because God ain't gonna get angry but a few times. And he was kind of firm with him at first and over, Moses, he got some act right, and he did. Without the strong communication of Aaron, I don't know that this would have, been successful. But if God chose you, it has to be successful. Aaron over might have left Moses might have left Aaron and overstepped God's boundaries if he saw that this was like a sort of competition instead of a collaboration. So he didn't look at his brother as being competition, because why don't God just choose you to do it instead of me? Being that he chose me to walk around with his rod and this staff, I am the superior. Never did that cross Moses' mind. It was a shared responsibility, and they collaborated just as such, which led them to being successful. We got 2 more slides and we'll be good to go. Moses and Aaron's relationship with God, we talked about that. I'm just going to touch this really quick. God called Moses from the burning bush. And you can imagine how Moses would react to that when he had to go back and tell the people and tell, Aaron and the others, oh man, shoot, I just heard from this burning bush. God spoke to me and he told me to do this and told me to do that. He thought that the people wouldn't believe him, and he said, he will speak to the people for you and it will be as if you were God. You know, Moses had a different outlook on that. Like, man, shoot, these people, I go back and tell them I spoke to a bush that was burning, back then, like, man, no. Who speaks to a burning bush? You've been smoking the bush or what? You've been doing something other than that because I don't think God's gonna talk to you to a burning bush. Man, get up out of here. We don't want to hear that. You're talking foolish. But that collaboration between him and Aaron allow him to understand that, okay, I build some confidence because not only did God speak to me, he spoke to my brother and sent my brother and us to meet up at some point in time. Then now I can understand, okay, I see now. I am not crazy. I gotta do this because being how strange must it be that God spoke to Aaron all the way back home and I'm here. We all had the same idea and had the same message. And God told me that Aaron would come, and he also told me that Aaron would speak for me. So this is true. Y'all cannot believe if you want, but I'm telling you, this is what's gonna happen. If you don't listen to me, God gonna do this. Those 10 plagues is gonna happen. So he got his confidence. And that's all he needed. The humility and reliance on God's provision, God used Aaron's strength to overcome Moses's weakness. The teamwork and unity, they worked together without competition, supporting each other's ministry. Never one they were in competition between each other, between the two of them. They worked together for the good of the Lord. Their perseverance, they continued God's work despite of their many failures along the way, because I can honestly tell you there were some challenges walking back and forth from Egypt to Midian where they were. That's a good little walk and ride on a camels or a donkey or whatever they were riding on. That was pretty terrible. But throughout their many failures and opposition, they never gave up. They persevered. Forgiveness and reconciliation. They moved forward after mistakes, modeling their restoration of their relationship. So I can imagine, it was talks between the two of them, like, "Hey, man, you left me going 40 years. We didn't even know where you were. Why you leave us?" So they put that aside and reconciled their relationship. Next slide, please. Mhm. The individual calling, we already spoke that. I'm just going to show you real quick. This is Moses talking to the burning bush. That was his initial calling from God. Uh, This is how God spoke to him. This is when he spoke to him in Exodus 3 to lead Israel, receive direct commands from God. And Aaron, I command you to speak to my word. I'm going to speak to you through you and allow you to speak for Moses. And the Lord instructed Aaron to go into the wilderness to meet with Moses. And there he is meeting with Moses and Moses and praying with Moses, and Moses holding up his staff and commanding his people from the hill there. And that was Aaron. And Aaron looked almost like a modern day man up here in Fredericksburg, but that's what they look like. Next slide. The value of Moses and Aaron's collaboration. We already saw the value of it. The end result of all of this and the value of all of this partnership was to free the people. Aaron's and Moses' partnership was the most instructive example in the Bible of how we and how people in the role of trust and shared purpose can achieve great things. If we work together and not against each other, what can be accomplished? But we got to put God first, and He has to be first, and we must follow His lead, especially when He have chosen us to do such a thing and not deviate from that. That's why when I pray, I constantly ask for your guidance and leadership, and speak for me, speak through me and to me, because I don't want to do the wrong thing and I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I certainly don't want to, be off course and stray away from the path that you have chosen for me. This is my constant prayer for my life, because many of the years of this 48 years of my life, I have many times veered off course. And so I know what this would have to been like for them too, to be in constant prayer and collaboration, like, guide me through this wilderness, guide us, keep us on the right path, show us that true north that we need to, that path that we need to go to make sure we end up in the right places and not in the wrong hands, and fight for us and fight, to fight for us and give us the strength to fight if we have to. The evidence of their collaboration is found throughout Exodus and Numbers. I can encourage you all. I know you all have, but I encourage you to go back and just refresh your mind and your heart on how this takes place. It can really, really, really help us in our own life walk, in our own path, in this life walk with God. Aaron ruled as Moses' voice, joint confrontation with Pharaoh, and the priestly service alongside Moses' leadership, mutual support in battle. They shared the accountability when things go wrong. They didn't blame one another. We did this collectively. Something happened. How do we fix this? What do we do? Now let's go back to prayer. Where do we do? Hey, I got you. This was in the plan. Keep moving. Keep doing what I tell you to do. I got your back. While facing all those challenges together, they still, prospered, became prosperous in the end. Next slide is the collaboration revelation, which we're close to the end. God's will was revealed through the combination of their divine communication through Moses and Aaron. God revealed his will to Aaron, and Moses led the freedom of the people from Pharaoh by having the people escape and parting the Red Sea, allowing the people to travel through and through that, and no longer being oppressed by Pharaoh. God promises to perform the signs and the wonders in Egypt to demonstrate his power. First one was that staff. He turned into a cobra, I think, some sort of snake. But the witches and the sorcerers that was there, they did the same thing and turned something into a snake as well, but not near as powerful as Moses. And they consider him as such a witch, and he was doing witchcraft and things like that. Tried to discredit him and his will for God and what God was trying to tell him. But in the end, we knew the end result, how that ended up for him. He will harden Pharaoh's heart, but still bring his people out of the mighty acts of judgment, which is found in Exodus 7. He also the revelation that Moses will deliver God's command to both Israelites and Pharaoh, acting as a prophet, mouthpiece for Moses. Aaron did. And Moses and Aaron obeyed God's command, performing miracles throughout the land, and such as turning Aaron's staff into that serpent that we just spoke about. God wills from Moses and Aaron is to be bold, and the obedient message was to Moses to speak directly to Aaron, and speak directly. Aaron to speak on his behalf when he fell short in leading the Israelis and the Israelites out of freedom through signs, wonder, and divine judgment. When they say divine judgment, remember those 10 plagues. That was their judgment. The final slide before we take any question, the life lessons, the collaboration activation lessons. I gathered is identify the value each other's strength in your team. This can be, practice at work, school, in the workplace, in our churches. Identify and value each other's strength in our team. We can do so much together if we work together instead of against each other. Build trust through consistent support and clear communication. That's self-explanatory. Maintain shared purpose while respecting each other's individuals' roles. Respecting each other's space. Lend a hand when you can. If something that you're doing as a servant have become completed, help somebody else that need help. If they don't need help, some people like to work alone. But I guarantee you, man, we work sometimes better together. More heads is better than one. Not one person has there's no such thing as a dumb question. But people like to say that. But two heads is sometimes better than one. Lead with humility, man, and integrity. Some things that seem so easy can be sometimes difficult. Tell the truth, be truthful. God wants you to be that way. He created us to be that way. Foster a life of forgiveness. And this is a tough one, boy, but this is probably the most worst one that we could possibly, lack. Forgiveness. How could you want forgiveness, but you can't forgive others? But these two brothers forgave each other. Aaron forgave Moses for leaving, and Moses forgave Aaron for being that big brother that probably beat up on him when he saw him. And no, I'm just kidding. But Moses forgave Aaron just for being, distant, and knowing where he was and who he was, and probably not coming to save him when he was under the command of the Pharaoh. They knew that he had done something, but nobody came to his rescue until God intervened. Invest in mentoring. Pick somebody up who's down, man, and preparing successors. I think that's why Apostle always liked to collaborate. She always encouraged people with businesses. Hey, tell me what your business is. I know people. We can help you. Somebody can help you. If I don't know, I'll find somebody. I always tell my friends and family that if I can't help you, I certainly will find and help you find somebody, or I may know somebody that can help. Moses and Aaron collaboration remind us all that true leadership is not about the individual brilliance, but about partnership, purpose, and purposeful teamwork. And the last slide, I got a bunch of images on it. No matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, where you're going, how bad you speak, if you don't find yourself attractive or whatever the case may be, no matter who you are, how you are, where you're from, who your parents are, your past, your thoughts, or the way you wear your hair, anything, the color of your skin. No matter who you are, what you've done, God can and will use the most unlikely people to do what he needs to do. God can use you. He can use us. That concludes Bible study for tonight. Thank you all.
So to our YouTube family, we thank you for joining us, coming and being a part of us today. Please don't forget to go and check out the replay. If you have any questions, just post them right there. All right.